This is Steve McGrath, and you're listening to Beyond the Helmet. This week, I'm pleased to bring you my conversation with Brian DeMarco. Now, most of our podcasts revolve around an athlete's story through the game, and Brian is going to be doing that, but in a little bit different way. Brian's story really revolves around what happened to him physically while playing and how that sets off a chain reaction of events that ultimately leads him to where he is today at DRAFTR Media. So he's going to explain what he's doing now, and his journey through the game really is a story that you have to sit back and listen to. What he went through and how it ultimately made him the man that he is today is an incredible tale. I hope you take the time to listen to all of it. There is certainly a lot that you can take from it, and I want to thank Brian for going into so much detail in a story that really belongs on the big screen, if not a book. Now, before we get into Brian and his story, I need to remind you all that we're brought to you by Team Builder. Team Builder works with over 500 high school football programs nationwide, as well as colleges and the NFL. So if you're looking to rework your weightlifting program or just get any sort of more information to sort of shake things up, go to their website, use the promo code VICTORY, VIQTRY, and you're going to get a free gift. And lastly, also Zone and CBD from Lofa to Tupu. I'm going to keep bringing it up and mentioning to you because what he's doing is really special in terms of providing the meals to different families throughout this pandemic that we're going through. And the product itself really works. So check out Zone and CBD if you are in the market for that type of product. Now, without any further ado, here's my conversation with Brian DeMarco from DRAFTR Media. All right. I am pleased to be joined by DRAFTR CEO Brian DeMarco. Brian, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on your podcast. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for taking the time. And as I said from the top there, DRAFTR Media. I've been following you, watching you on LinkedIn for at least a year, even though we haven't been connected that long. I've been silently paying attention to what you're doing because you put out a lot of great content. But from the top, can you just tell everyone what you're doing now? What is DRAFTR all about?
So, interestingly enough, DRAFTR actually started about, it's been 4 or 5 years now as a tech company. And there's a lot under the DRAFTR brand. So I initially partnered with a friend of mine who's an engineer guy out in Silicon Valley, brought him back here. And I had spent the previous years, I owned the largest high school football news site in the state of Texas. So I owned Texas HS football for a number of years. And I really got that site, not so much to turn this around into this huge publication, but primarily I knew that the publication business was broken. The publishing industry as a whole was antiquated and needed change. And so it's something I recognized from a business standpoint. And so I got together with my partner, Aaron King, DRAFTR, which has built a technology that is a very unique ecosystem for content creators and publishers in this. Primarily what it does in a nutshell is it allows content creators to more efficiently monetize their premium content. And it does that by solving a major problem. Matter of fact, the biggest problem for content creators, which isn't having a site where you can charge a subscription. Their biggest problem is discoverability. So unless you have 1 million followers on YouTube or Instagram, long ways away from making any real revenue off of a subscription basis, right? So when we introduced the publications into this ecosystem, which is still in closed beta, by the way. We'll be launching it next year at South by Southwest. It's the game. It brought good content creators instant visibility to millions of people, depending on the publisher that picked up their content. But on the publisher side of this, look, we know that the duopoly that is Facebook and Google has really gobbled up over 80% of global ad revenue. That's why we see the ESPNs of the world and the Condé Nast, these big publishers, And when they're downsizing, they're cutting all of their content creators and that editing staff because that revenue is just not there anymore. So essentially what you have is beyond Facebook and Google, you have every publisher in the world fighting over the scraps of what, right? So we built in this system in a way for publishers of content acquisition. So again, solving the biggest problem for content creators and dramatically reducing the cost of content for publishers. That is DRAFTR Tech. However, during this time, when we were building this technology in closed beta, we were getting a lot of people coming to us and asking us for traditional agency type work, like building a website, graphic design, things like that. And both my partner and I had agency background and knew how to build brands. So we said, why don't we just open up our own agency? Well, DRAFTR Media was born quickly that we were able to fund our own seed round for DRAFTR Tech, which is pretty amazing and a huge blessing from an entrepreneurial standpoint to be able to do that. But it grew fast, and we work with brands like Uber and Sony and Ram Trucks and, you know, a lot of really great nonprofits like Easter Seals, National Domestic Violence Hotline, NFL's Retired Players Association, the PFRPA. So yeah, it's been a exciting ride, and this DRAFTR brand has continued to expand. We even launched our own publishing site ourselves this last year with Made Sports, which is going to be a very unique sports publication. And again, based off of our experience, we started Made because we knew in college and NFL locker rooms across the country, players, whenever you ask a player where the best ball is being played, they always passionately defend their home state. It's Texas, it's Ohio, it's Pennsylvania, right? It's California, Florida. So we're going to be telling stories from that passionate state's perspective. So we launched this national brand, this Made Sports brand, and then we started off with 5 state sites with Texas Made, California Made, Florida Made, Georgia Made, and Ohio Made. And then we'll continue to grow that across the country as we expand. So gives you a good firm look of, you know, of the DRAFTR brand and all that it entails. There's a lot to it.
Yeah, and you know, obviously with your football record, you know, Aaron King, I know he knows a thing or two about long snapping. You know, the fact that you guys have
he's the only guy I know, like he's got like a gazillion followers on YouTube, right? So he's at Deep Snap. But for a long snapper, his YouTube channel is amazing, right? He's got some great content.
No, he definitely does. But I just love the fact that you guys are able to stay in the sports space while also leveraging a legitimate skill set that was sorely needed for this industry, being able to help content creators. And I know that it's not just sitting in a sports box. You guys do it. You already mentioned a lot of the nonprofits and other organizations that you work with. So the fact that you are able to still stay connected to sports while also leveraging this in helping other, you know, institutions, different, you know, sectors of the economy, I think is great. And it's obviously a very strong testament to what you guys are capable of doing. And you know, I can't wait to see what the future holds. You know, and part of the reason why I'm so optimistic and, you know, bullish on this is going back to what you do on social media. You put so much of yourself out there, let alone just some general advice about your marketing stuff, because I know you want to help people maximize their marketing efforts.
So you've been watching my videos. Here we go.
Well, I told you I've been a fan for a while. So just with that being said, given everything we're going through right now, the coronavirus, social distancing, and I know you just put up a great, you know, 10-minute or so video that details your story, but what would you say now to people just being in this position, trying to best utilize this time? And even if it's not an individual companies, just what goes through your mind for, you know, how, whether you're a person or a company, how you should be leveraging this time to best position yourself?
It's actually a great question, and it's something that I've been hit with a lot over especially the last 3 weeks or so, as the quarantine got serious. So look, this is in every crisis, there is also opportunity, right? As a matter of fact, it reminds me of a quote that the symbol in Chinese, the symbol that they make for crisis, has 2 strokes to it. One of the strokes stands for danger, and the other stroke stands for opportunity. So I think in looking at this from a brand's perspective, and a lot of look, we've been busily over the last month rewriting marketing strategies for all of our clients. Finding now is the time for a brand to reimagine how they meet their customer. They need to reimagine how we engage, because unfortunately, I don't think once COVID passes, and it will, I think it's going to leave a mark that's going to forever change business. Matter of fact, I told my teenage kids last night that this is one of those things that happens in history where people are going to ask you where you were, what you were doing. It's kind of like 9/11, or, for my grandparents' generation, it was Pearl Harbor, right? So in looking at the scope of this and how this is changing business, we've been telling brands to creatively think about how they reimagine how they meet their customer. And a lot of this has been obviously focused around digital, but how do we make digital more immersive? How do we do it in a more meaningful way? Because so many brands struggle with this on a daily basis, that, their social posts aren't getting enough hits, and it seems to be endemic of a lot of brands. So I think on top of reimagining how you meet your customer and in this digital effort, I think it's also an opportune time to build on your brand. One of the difficult conversations I've had with a few of our clients has been, how do we get our sales team to keep pounding the pavement, so to speak, and keep pushing out there? And we're sending out campaigns, and we're trying to solicit business and gain business. And how do we do that in a tactful way with COVID? And realistically, you can't. These are unprecedented times that we're in now. We've frozen the world's economy. Now, right or wrong, and we all have our thoughts on that and how that should be done. And I certainly don't want to make this too political, but I think what's important here is that brands start focusing on who they are and building content for themselves that are taking advantage of this space and time where we have an unprecedented amount of people that are driven towards the internet and consuming content, whether that's for education, entertainment, socialization. They're there. So now is the time. So it's doubling down on your own content, your efforts, and they'll find building their own content why they and not what they do. If they're building that why, when things start to pick up, people are going to remember the brands that took that extra step, them where they are during this time. And I truly believe that. I think that people are just going to remember the brands that made an impact and understood and were empathetic to people and other businesses during this time. So it's tough, but that's certainly where I believe the focus needs to be.
And it makes a lot of sense. It's just so, I would imagine, so very difficult to stand out when every company that is, fiscally able to is going through this process and trying to find a way to stand out and make that impression that, to your point, it's just sort of people are swarming to social media. So at what point you have to get creative to rise above the noise.
And you do. And I've been reminding people too a lot in the last few weeks of some of the brands that were born during the 2008 crisis where we thought, oh my gosh, it's all over. We're headed into another Great Depression. Slack was born that year. Airbnb was born that year. Square was born that year. And you're obviously seeing a trend that during this downturn, these digital brands, right, are coming to fruition. And I think we're going to see a strong presence of that again. I think we're going to see some brands that rise to the top because of their digital efforts, whether it be software or purely based on the type of content that they're pushing out there.
Yes, absolutely. And Brian, I really wanted to get into this with you because for the amount of optimism and passion that you have in your videos and just talking to you, I can feel the fact that you've gone through so much to get to this point. It's astounding to me. And I know that to do this in one podcast is obviously impossible because your story is so long that it should be a book. But could you just
getting there? Hopefully later this year it'll be done.
But because I want to get into the football story itself, but can you just talk about the battle that you had in as much detail as you want to share, but just to physically go through what you went through going towards, what caused the end of your career for you to even be at this point today?
So I will tell you, and I think you'll understand this. The title of the book is Everything But Death. I am obviously a man of faith, and there's an actual story behind this beard that ties into my Christ, and that got me to where I am today. And I think that's been the most helpful thing during this whole coronavirus crisis, is that I have some perspective to lean on, and I know hard times. So had a really rough childhood growing up, broken family, all the drama that comes with that, like a lot of kids, right? Barely made it out of high school. And ended up getting over to Michigan State. Still battling there in a lot of ways that I'll go into in another podcast. And then, of course, end up getting drafted to the inaugural Jacksonville Jaguars in 1995 as the 40th pick overall in the draft. I played 4 years in Jacksonville. I started every game as a rookie and obviously played on until I signed my UFA with Cincinnati and played there for 2 years. So when I left Jacksonville, I was already broken. I had some injuries spinal injuries that I was kind of dealing with on the side, if you know what I mean. That's what players do when you're real injured. Nobody wants a lineman with a back problem. But I had hairline fractures in my vertebrae that I was playing with. I was self-medicating. I was doing all the things that you should not do. But going into that last hit, I already had 5 hairline fractures, L4 and L5. I had 2 blown discs. I was having extreme nerve pain going down my right leg, and I knew I had problems, and my clock was ticking, right? So that final hit, I end up getting hit from behind. The back of my leg speared head to head, and I do a reverse toe touch, if you can imagine that. The back of my head touches my heels, and my spine breaks in 17 places. But it also caused an avulsion fracture of my hip, and that's where the muscle shears the bone in half. So hellacious injury. Everything kind of got flushed. I ended up, that was in 2000. By 2005, 2006, I'm so disabled. I lost 90% of the function of my right leg. It gradually got worse as the years went on, as a lot of nerve problems do. But however, I do think it was also coupled with other issues I was having psychologically. I think as a pro athlete, I was falling into a deep depression in making my transition and trying to figure out where my value was. And I think that depression compounded the injury. I don't think it does. I know it did. So it made things worse. But if you can imagine, by this point in time, I'm a biscuit away from 500 pounds. I'm like 290 right now. Put that in perspective. but I'm so disabled that both hips rotted through the flesh on both sides. Vacuums, young, beautiful wife, Autumn, and 2 young kids at the time. She's taking care of me 24 hours a day. And to tell you how bad it was, and my son was born in December of 2005. By February of 2006, I was watching my young, beautiful bride push a mattress to the back of a storage unit in West Texas. I was home for the next 4 months, but was also a big turning point for me personally. I remember, and you probably heard this in the last video I had on LinkedIn, but this was such a profound moment and so intensely personal for me. And I still get choked up every time I tell this story, but especially for guys out there that are married. And imagine what you might say to your wife the first night you're living in a storage unit and your wife actually stayed in Bolt, right? So right? So you're married, you get it. So, what do you say? Like, I literally didn't say all the things that I should have, like, hey, I am really sorry. And I'm going to find a way to make things better. I literally, imagine a scenario. It's February in West Texas. It's cold. It's winter. We have a 3-year-old and a newborn in between us. We're piled under about 50 blankets. We have a heater plugged in, one of those old ones from like the 50s that would glow that like atomic orange color. And we're jacking electricity from somebody that left their Christmas tree lights up, right? Running these extension cords. So I look at my bride over my kids and the atomic glow of this heater. What is wrong with you? I go, seriously, are you crazy? Like, I'm broke and broken in every way. I was a dead man. And she's young and beautiful. And I was like, you can have a life. The kids can have a life. Go live with your parents. I'm a goner. I'm done. And she looked at me with the most peaceful look on her face. Sorry. And she said, I made a promise to you and a promise to God, and everything will be okay. And I was floored. I was like, how are you okay? How are you strong right now? Can't you see that we're in a storage unit? We just had a baby and I have you living here and you can have it all. And and this strength that just oozed out of her soul. I was thinking, I had been around the toughest guys in the world. Like, oh my gosh, right? There's some tough, mean hombres, right? I had never seen strength like this before. She was truly amazing. So I'll fast forward this, okay, because it is a long story. But she ends up, right, years of being homeless and moving from apartments to vacant houses to storage units. And it was bad for years. So my wife ends up writing a letter to none other than Mike Ditka. Ditka, who is a good friend and an angel on my shoulder ever since, he answered the bell inside of 24 hours. He had people at our door, homeless situation, within about a month, 2 best spinal surgeons in the world. So hope flooded back into our lives. I still wasn't there yet as a man in faith. I was still very much riding the fence. I literally treated my wife like she had the red emergency phone to Jesus, right? I would joke with her, you're praying for this, right? And she'd say, that's how, yeah, so we're in, hope floods back in. I'm going to have a miracle surgery, take miracle drugs, be a husband, be a dad, go back to work. All these great things were going to happen. So these docs studied me for a week. And you can imagine the excitement that I felt as I'm waiting in his office to hear the prognosis, the next steps. And that first doctor walks in, looks me dead in my eyes and said, if you were a horse, we'd have shot you by now. And as I'm dumbfounded, like, what are we going to do? Next doctor walks in, pulls my wife to the side and says, you need to prepare yourself to put him in full-time care. This is as good as it gets. He'll never walk again unassisted. I don't know if you've ever been in that situation or anybody listening to that. You know, we have low points, but when hope is ripped, we had nothing but hope, right? And now hope is gone. The best doctors in the world have no real viable answers other than to keep fusing my spine and keep drugging me up. That was the answer. So it wasn't good enough. So we came back to Texas, and my wife and I were sitting on the front porch of our house, and she reaches out and she grabs my hands, and brother, let me tell you, we said our first very real, very desperate, very even aggressive, I might say, prayer to God together as husband and wife for the very first time. And it was a real prayer. This wasn't a prayer like, oh, Lord Jesus, come into my life and take over. And it wasn't that. This was literally me saying, okay, my whole life people have been telling me to come after you. I'm doing everything they told me to do. I'm getting in the word every day. I'm praying every day. And I'm here. I'm coming to the table. You better come too. It was almost a challenge, right? So literally within minutes of that prayer ending, we come up with a concept for the product that ended up teaching me how to walk again. Now, I tell you, when it came to us, it came to both me and my wife. She ran in the house at the time, grabbed paper and pencils, and separately for about 15 minutes, we frantically drew pictures and took notes about this image we were seeing in our heads. We both popped up, said, hey, I have an idea. Because I knew I needed to move again, but I was morbidly obese, completely disabled, with my hips rotted through the flesh. How in the world was I going to squat or bend or twist or do any of these functional human movements, right? So we drew these pictures, took notes separately, came together, and we drew the exact same thing. And that was scary. That was going, okay, if that's not God's hand, I don't know what is. We still have those drawings today.
That's awesome.
And so we end up making the first one out of what we had, because we had no money, right? And I say we had no money, I'm talking about we don't have like pennies in the couch cushions kind of no money. There's nothing. We had pawned or sold everything worth value. So we had some old yellow truck tie-down straps and an old freight band that I used to use for resistance, those big giant rubber bands, right? Sewed this thing together with fishing line, made this first product. You can check it out. It's called Primal 7. And I just remember my wife tying it off to a tree. And she walks me out there, puts this band around my back. And I just remember letting go of the back of her neck, my hand on her shoulders. And I dropped my cane and I stood on my own without anybody touching me or propping me up for the first time in years. So it was a victory. I won at something for the first time in years. And I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot what that felt like, right? So I wanted more of it. So for 3.5 years, I did the hardest rehab every single day of my life for 3.5 years on this product. Literally in my backyard or off a tree in a park somewhere, and rehabbed every single day. 3.5 years, I threw out my walker and my canes for the last time. And I said, we need to go help other people. We ended up going out and raised $4.5 million to launch this company. Now, that is also a grace of God miracle. Look at me. I already had strikes going against me. I'm a former NFL football player, and I'm tattooed up gorilla with a long beard, right? So that's not conducive to $1 million checks coming to you in business. And I was getting all the meetings that I wanted, but I quickly figured out that, I was getting meetings because they wanted to hear, what was it like to play against Reggie White and Bryant Young and, all these great players, and they wanted to share stories. So I knew I had about 5 seconds to start talking and bring the business acumen about 1,000 times greater than anybody else. So we ended up getting this done. We built the brand and built real community around the brand. It was very passionate. It was about helping people get over their physical obstacles. And, we were working with people from stroke victims to quadriplegics, severe brain TBI, brain injuries, et cetera. And we built this company up, and I ended up selling it about 5 years ago. It was time. It was time for me to exit, but I built it up, sold it, had a successful exit. But I discovered during this time, and it was strange of how we came back to DRAFTR Media, because what I enjoyed the most was helping people build their brand. I loved the strategy. I love that process every day. And I tell people pretty famously, for people that know me, that it's chess, not checkers, right? But I love the grind of building a brand. I love the daily challenge. And that's what inspires me. That's what moves me on a daily basis. To be able to help people experience that same type of success is amazing and fulfilling. So that was my short story version of my life. So sorry it took so long, but hopefully it was meaningful. And you get that literally during that time, I was given over to everything but dying. There's drug addiction, right? I was completely addicted to painkillers. I was the biggest opiate addict you can imagine. The disability, all the other issues, homelessness, extreme financial duress. We made it through all of that. God's grace, totally for me and personally, it has all been about this very intimate and personal walk with Jesus on a daily basis, and learning to live off of that dependence of his grace. And trust me, brother, it was a walk. And I was the opposite. I'll put it to you this way. I was the guy that made fun of Christians. I was the guy that bashed Christians who were playing, come on, bunch of Bible thumpers. Come on. So for me, I'm so stubborn that God had to remove everything from me to teach me one of the most valuable lessons I've ever learned. And that was truly how to authentically love people. Like real, like just these relationships, these are what are valuable. Us meeting, this is what's valuable in life. And I just didn't care about those relationships. So friendships like ours to deeper ones, like my relationship with my wife, I had to learn to value those things and learn how to truly serve, which is the secret to all of it, to be honest with you. The secret to happiness in life, learn how to serve other people. So anyways, I'm done for a second. I'm going to breathe and let you talk.
God, there is so much there. It is an impossible story to follow. So that being
I've heard
said,
that a couple of times.
So for you to reach, just to generally use the term bottoming out, where you finally, you feel so broken that, you're waving the towel, so to speak, and you're ready to say that first joint prayer. I mean, I hope this isn't redundant, but, so it's literally for you to get that point and for you to come out the other side. Of course, as you just stated, faith was such a paramount part of that, along with the other pillar being your wife, to get you there and be the rock through everything. But the fact that you talked about work and the amount of hard work you put to rehab into it, the hard work that you did to take the idea of a business and then breathe life into it. It sounded like there are just these three pillars that got you through. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but being able to have the mindset that you're going to work, regardless of how down in the dumps that you were, work, the physical relationship, the relationship with someone who is physically there that you could lean on, and then developing that third, which I would imagine was the newest one to you, because a football player, you can work. Of course, your wife is your wife, but developing that third pillar. Seems like those are the three things that really were able to help you take your life from where it was to get you to where you are now.
It is. And I think it kind of gets summed up and even a little bit easier than these three pillars. I can't express, for anybody that's going through any hardship right now, I can't express enough the importance of what you think and how critically important what you think is on a daily basis. What you think about yourself, what you think about what you're doing, is critically important. There's a lot of stories in business out there, and and of course it abounds in the sports world with the confidence that you have to play and all of these things. But there's some famous books that were written about the power of your thought. There's Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. There's The Secret, that was put out there by whoever that was pushed out on Oprah. The Secret, to get back into this where we cut off, is that we talked about the book. Did you hear me talk about the Bible reference?
No.
Okay. So there's the books that were written that we mentioned, Matt. And if you look at the Gospels and some of the stories and parables that Jesus was telling us, like if you have faith like a mustard seed, you can move mountains. But it goes even deeper than that. And so over the last couple of years, I've been studying the original Hebrew and Aramaic so I can understand the original translation of the Bible. And so I stumbled across the word wisdom. And it just intrigued me because the word wisdom, as it's given to us in our English language, is not what it means in the Hebrew, the way they were saying it. The word in Hebrew is chokmah. And chokmah is a law. Chokmah is a law like gravity. So if I take this can of carbonated water and I let go of it, it's going to drop to the ground, right? It's gravity. It's a law that God created. And chokmah is very similar to that. Chokmah basically states that whatever you present before God that is righteous and good, and you present it before God, you are to consider it complete. It's finished. It's already done. So if you're asking him for something, right, you are to think is it's done. So we know God works on a timeline of past, present, and future, living them all simultaneously. So what's done to him is done. It's our timeline, right, that concerns us, right, always. So as I took these things like primal, like raising funds, like the other successful markers we set in our business world or my personal life, I take these things that are good and righteous and present them before God. And then I live my life as they are already complete. And I'll tell you how powerful this is, because I've used this in many facets of my life. But one of the most powerful that will resonate with people is how it impacted the first time we raised money. So my wife and I, we had pulled on some advisors in the early days of people that knew business and knew product, market, and all these things. And we sat down, did a pro forma. What are we going to launch this thing? Real and significant way. So we came up with this number was 2.5 million. Okay. So you have to remember, we don't have two nickels rubbed together. So we took this number, presented it before do with it with this almost complete package we could at the time. And we did it realistically too. We didn't say, hey, we want this overnight. God's not a magic genie, right? And you have to work for things. He still wants you to engage with him. We started praying prior to receiving this money. We said, okay, by this time in this, we need to receive this much money, continue to build this product, and we're going to continue to do our own R&D to push the product forward to this point. So we get into the month and the year, and we stayed faithful and stayed praying for this, although we're in the month we were praying about, and we were nowhere near talking to any investor that was near $2.5 million investing in this, not even close. People that would put in an extra 10,000 so we could, buy some more strap. So I just mine's office one day, and it was a physical therapy clinic, and he had been using our prototype product in his office. This guy is one of the most successful home builders and commercial property builders in the state of Texas. So I obviously befriended him, got a chance to share my story, told him, hey, what I was doing there and all of this was zero intention. He literally told me, I'm all in. Bring me a business plan. Bring me something, right? This should have never happened. If I handed over a business plan today that looked like the one I gave him, oh my gosh, I would just laugh me out of the office if I gave that to me. It was horrible. I basically sold him this vision, this dream. This is what I want to do. I want to go help people overcome these same obstacles. I need $2.5 million. That very next week, he stroked us a check for the first portion of that, which was $1.5 million. So of God's grace and this amazing thing that was happening in our lives, because we truly had nothing. I mean, I was living in a house at the time that had no air conditioning. I mean, we live out in Texas, so it's miserable. Had holes in the walls and, right, not a place to raise a family. And so the morning that I was going to pick up this check for $1.5 million, okay, I go out to my truck and I go back into the house, tell the wife and kids, go gather as much money as you can find. We come out with $1.37. And I mean, I was below E, and I had $25 to get to his office to pick up this check. I made it on $1.27 to pick up a check for 1.5. And it was every aspect of it, totally God's grace, but totally trusting that he had completed this task without fail. And the belief when I tell you that it's believing it, it's seeing it in my bank account. I literally saw it in my bank account and acted as if, hey, well, we'll be able to afford it then because we're going to have in October. So I was making plans as if I had this money in there, and I knew it was going to be there in October. And I truly lived it and believed it was going to be there. So the power of your thought, not only what it does for you on an emotional level, but this power of learning how to trust in God for everything, little things and the big things. It's the real secret.
That's incredible. And Brian, I know that we're short on time. There's obviously a lot that I'd still like to ask you, but more than anything, what victory is about, as I move my camera here, is putting the IQ into victory. And based off of your story, everything that you've just talked about, that's more than enough to help anyone change the way they mentally process things so they can ultimately get to their victory. And
so listen, in so many ways, I love what you're doing. And I think it's inspiring and need that. So I do have to run into my next meeting with a client. Part two. So whatever's going to, because it's important, especially now that we're dealing with COVID, that and have some perspective. We will get by this. Everybody goes through tough times and the world goes through tough things, but we will get by. This too will pass and things will they just will. I know they will. So anyways, brother, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to catching up next time.
Definitely. Thank you so much for taking the time.
All right. Thanks, brother. We'll talk soon.
Sounds good.
Thanks,